Hi, everyone. It's Raghu back with Mindrolling, and I have the pleasure of being with a good friend. It's crazy. Some people, you're crazy saying that. You never met him in person, but it doesn't seem to matter. It's beyond the physical, you know.
Yes.
But we just did a thing a couple of weeks ago, a podcast, but it just wasn't enough time. We ran out of time. So this is the first time, Bruce, this is Bruce Damer, by the way. Welcome back, Bruce. Dr. Bruce Damer. And the first time I've ever done this, where we have part deux, part two. So I'm happy that this worked out and you're back. So one of the things that I don't know if we really got to it. You know, we may repeat a little bit because in my case, I can't remember. I'll be lucky if I can remember that we got together. But I don't think we talked about something that's obviously on everybody's minds, hearts, emotions, spirit, which is what is going on in our world. And it's like a collective grief is going on. And so, if you don't mind, Bruce, today just so happens, every Wednesday we put out, Love Serve Remember puts out a newsletter, and in it, you know, they'll have different things, some from Ramdas and some from any of the other people that we are part of the family. So I want to actually read this. This is Ramdas from, it's not too long at all, 1983 at Lama Foundation. Okay, just think, I started reading this thing and I went, wait a minute, 1983? I think it's like now. This is all a now, I would say. So Ramdas on Facing the Fire, a reflection on equanimity, courage, and compassion. And this is something we can talk about. It's time to very gently move closer to the fire. I can feel that where the mind might be frightened, maybe the heart can walk forward with courage about the immediate future. I do not feel that you came here just to, quote unquote, stay on the edge, but to really climb in. And if we're going to act from the space that I am suggesting, we really have to learn how to keep our hearts open in hell. To do that requires acknowledging inside ourselves a place of equanimity and learning to rest there even when our hearts are being tossed violently about. I don't have to go far afield to find a hell realm to describe. All too familiar images close at hand will provide your heart with the traumatic material for its work. He then lists, and I won't go through them because we don't need it. I mean, it's just a world in which millions die of starvation, though enough food is produced, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So he goes on to say, the equanimity to face all of this cannot be rooted in denial. Rather, it must be rooted in an acknowledgement of how it all is. But to look head on at the horrible beauty of the universe as is, without hiding behind fantasy or denial, and selective perception takes guts. To look Shiva in the eye, to acknowledge the violent as well as the gentle, the ugliness as well as the beauty, the greed and selfishness as well as the compassion and mercy, the sickness, death, and decay as well as health and life, and to all of it to say yes. That is the ground on which true equanimity rests. We protect our hearts because of fear they will break. Yes, they will break, but out of the pieces will be forged a new heart, a strong and fearless heart, a compassionate heart, a heart that is invulnerable. That is what is required, nothing less. So to be effective agents for social change, we have to start with ourselves. First, we have to work on ourselves until we can be in the world without being automatically reactive. As the stuff of the world around us comes pouring in on us, instead of reacting with fear and aversion or greed and grasping, the art is to introduce a moment of clear, quiet awareness between the input or perception and the output or response. By adding this moment of awareness, we break the chain of reactivity that keeps us all so unconsciously bound. Look around and see how reactive people are to each other and how little space there is in the system. Just bringing a bit of awareness to each moment can help. Gandhi says, what you contribute may seem very insignificant, but it's still very important that you do it. With a bit of quiet awareness, you have a different perspective in situations. And sometimes with that perspective, you can see alternatives in a difficult situation, which shifts the entire dynamic and brings space and possibility anew. Ramdas Lama Foundation,
Beautiful.
2025.
Yes,
as far as I'm concerned,
1983
right?
to 2025. Yeah. That is 42 years.
I know. That says something, in terms of looking at the span of what's going on. And, my posit here, even question, not so much a question, but obviously, these things don't just come out of the air. How everything is being created right now in this moment. And there's a collective karma that we are engaged in. And here we are. What do you think of that? I mean, everybody, by the way, if you're just listening and you haven't heard Bruce before, but a lot of Bruce's work is around discovering the origin of life. So these questions are intimately involved.
In our field, back in the day, maybe 30, 40 years ago, about the time Ram Dass wrote those beautiful words or spoke them, there was a thought that catastrophe was a huge stress that could prevent life from starting on the earth very early. Because if you actually look at the moon, if you go out tonight and you look at the moon's almost full, you'll see all these impact craters. And not only that, you'll see what are called seas or mare, which is actually lava flows released by big impacts and kind of disruption of the moon. The moon would have glowed orange when those things were formed. And it was thought that, life couldn't get going because these impactors were also hitting Earth. And we're talking about 4 billion years ago, 3.8 billion years ago, the estimated age. It's now thought that those impacts may have led to life, in that it stirred the system up for newness. New molecules were released into the atmosphere. In fact, molecules so important that were made out of carbon compounds, and then they rained back down onto the little warm pools, and we had the soup of life stirring. And it was only because of the stress of this, in a sense, the planet was shedding heat, but the solar system was shedding rocks, it was shedding its building blocks. And they were just raining down on all the early worlds. And then Jupiter, this giant, I call it the Sentinel, and it actually makes sense because it's the biggest planet in the solar system. It moved out and it pulled all the rocks with it and allowed a clearer sky for us. And then after that, there was catastrophe after catastrophe, shedding stress after shedding stress, including freeze-overs of the Earth and all those things. And those things, those stress points, when pushed down, they tested life's limits. And then when they were released, when the planet warmed up and the snowball Earth, the freeze-over, thawed, life just flourished or bloomed into the new world that emerged. It had made it through the gap or the neck or the stress point. And even our own species, we now know that East Africa dried out to a furnace, a few 100,000 years ago, and it was uninhabitable. And that our species was forced into the margins. And some of us went to South Africa and we lived along the shores and we ate high omega-3 foods. And we lived in caves. They found one of these places called Blombos Cave in South Africa, in the Drakensberg. And that's the earliest evidence of modern humans. Humans that were scratching symbols into bone. Humans that were using fire, that were doing culture. 135, 180,000 years ago. And there were very few of them because we were in this genetic neck. And somewhere in there was born mitochondrial Eve, who gifted us the common mitochondrion common to all humans. And with that mitochondrial gene, she possibly gifted us language or some unique skill that meant that we could radiate back out when we could get out of South Africa and radiate back through Africa into Europe, Asia, and the Americas. And then our species just occupied every niche because it was just so suited for it. So the times that we're in now, we can see them in that light. They're times of compression and shedding. So as we get more compressed by, challenges of our own making, or challenges that come from the environment, maybe not an asteroid impact, that would be quite a thing. A thermonuclear war would have done a similar job. But we then we have to hone the tools of our survival. We have to shed a lot of things that were not serving us. And like any people on a quest that are moving across, say, a mountain range, they have to pack the lightest that they can possibly pack, just enough to survive to get across that mountain range into the next verdant valley. And then there's a blooming. Then there's an expansion of a completely new culture that was shaped by the stress point. And so perhaps, and this has been Mother Nature's way of making robust, complex organisms for 4 billion years, and perhaps we're just in the same process. So it's a kind of meta-scale view. And if we go back, say, to the late 1930s, we had the stress of the Great Depression, the rise of fascism and a lot of complete instability, and then World War II, which was an immense stress on the system. And then a new world emerged in the 40s and 50s that, you grew up into, and so did I. Was it a better world? In some ways it was. We established worldwide institutions that actually functioned like the United Nations. And we did a lot of good in those periods, despite the fact that we were in a Cold War still, an ideological war.
Yeah.
But perhaps what we're doing now is we're getting ready to go through another one of these compression points and shed off those things and then emerge back out. And it's possibly the time for the greatest spiritual growth, as well as intellectual. We have the tools of AI, but it really challenges us to decide what's essential.
But so much ignorance, though. So much lack of compassion, empathy, even. Just it's overwhelming for people. Now, if historically, of course, what you're saying makes total sense. But here we are in the moment as individuals, and as Ram Dass said before, we have the challenge of changing our hearts before we can. We are human citizens. We need to do something, whatever it may be. Gandhi, even the smallest thing that you can't think it would do anything. It does something. I don't know. And then to think also in terms of karma, look what these beings don't just come out of nowhere. There's a karma that we collectively have actions that we have taken that have created what we're now like looking in horror at, no?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, in some sense, in order to deal with what is true karma? So let's ask the question, what is true karma? If someone concocts a tale about reality that isn't really grounded in reality, it's a projection. What is that? What kind of karmic act is that? Because perhaps what we're seeing is a lot of projection on others, on politics, on ideas of equality, on ideas of justice. But how much of it is really truth? How much is factual? How much is projection? That's a good question. We could do a measure of that.
Oh, it's not one of us that isn't doing that projection unless they are finally got to the stage of not two. If you're in that stage, which, we're talking about a Neem Karoli Baba and that kind of consciousness, then there is no reactivity, and there is doing the right thing, because out of the naturalness of the flow of the universe, what?
I'm reminded of another fact, which is in studying Ram Dass's history, especially in the early 70s, which was another time of compression and stress, right? We were the Vietnam War was going on. It was turned into quite a nasty engagement. It seemed like having no end. There was still conflict. There was Kent State in 1970. All these things were happening. Inflation, oil shocks, the Watergate scandal. You and I went through that, and it seemed like the whole system was a mess. There wasn't trust in government anymore. There were hot wars everywhere. There was a fear of a thermonuclear engagement. The Sahel drought was happening in Africa. Remember, we had there were limits. Those limits to growth published its report. The limits to growth was the report of the can't remember this, the Club of Rome in those days. And I think that if you looked at that period, you would see. And I was 9 or 10 years old or 12 years old in that period. It was headline after headline. And yet, what we kept doing, and this is up in Canada, where I was raised in Western Canada, the society kept kind of moving forward and building better systems, better healthcare, better transit, better colleges became universities. It was a constant sort of growth that was going on. Our town underwent a full transformation in British Columbia in that decade. And when Ram Dass was doing his work, I think he was paying attention to all these crises and these headlines, but he was building. He started the Death and Dying Initiative in those years, and he kept. I remember listening to him in a recent talk where he talked about it was every second night in a different city. Yeah. So he was literally going to completely different cities, developing a story, unbinding a story to unbind people from perhaps their daily concerns and point them in a different direction to show them that they themselves in their hearth and heart, where the answer could be in equanimity. Yeah. And so he was doing this all the time, and he created, I also lived near Krishnamurti's house in Ojai in the 80s. And they were all kind of doing this. Krishnamurti was giving us all spiritual haircuts. But all that said, you just kept moving forward with positivity from an equanimous base that you had developed and cultivated. And then you went out and you tried to help others to find their equanimous center and come from there. So they're not pushed around into panic, projection, the chickens that are running because the sky is falling. Yeah. And then they can act from that point. And perhaps that's our next task is to, bring the satsangs and the sanghas, continue to show them that there is a way to be in equanimity and then grow from there, grow from love and connection. Ram Dass talked about when you made eye contact, and that exquisite moment of eye contact, everything else drops away. Creed, sex, culture, acculturation, language, all goes away. With that simple eye contact, it's human to human. It's accessible to us at all times. So in a sense, it's like a doubling down back to those original things where in group, we're just landing ourselves as humans and meeting our basic, our needs from that level. Perhaps what he also said, I think I remember at one point, when you look into someone's eyes, what you see is a community of souls. And it's actually the souls that are in all of us, all transmitted all at once through this mechanism. Now, if we look at a phone, we're denigrating the eye contact thing. But when we rediscover eye contact, and perhaps this is what a satsanga or a sangha can always remind itself to, don't lose that. And then perhaps we start from there.
Yeah. So I think here's the perspective, really. I mean, because we're feeling it, so many people's emotions these days. We have gatherings online. We're having a big one in Boone, North Carolina in a couple mid-August. And, it's an opportunity for people to do exactly what you're expressing, to be able to be together and look each other in the eye. Here we are. We know that we are connected when we have the advantage, of course, of being in person together. It is a big advantage. And it's why Thich Nhat Hanh said that coming Maitreya Buddha is the Sangha. Yeah, that's a truism. And then, but still, we get a lot of reactivity around, what's going on in the world in all the different aspects of it. And it can tend to how people fall into a negative moment, and Sharon Salzberg calls it piling on. We just pile on everything and anything we can think of negatively, personally or in the world at large. And that creates suddenly there's a perspective of just general sitting in anxiety, staying more in that place. Also, of course, we're all very used to that place in our growing up, especially in our going up and going through our teen years and so on, which is automatically stressful from day one. So, yeah, we end up in that perspective. And the perspective you just gave of positivity. Actually, everyone, I wrote to, in the last podcast we did, either in the podcast or right after it or something, I mentioned to Bruce, this thing around AI, and it's fraught with all sorts of stuff, and there's a lot of talking about negative stuff coming from, I heard Altman talk and they said, well, what are the things you're most afraid of? And he listed 3. Any one of them happens, so there's a lot of fraughtness in that. And I said, and I think there's a lot of incredible, profound connections that can be made with the proper use of AI. And I said, well, I'm having a lot of trouble getting that across. There's lots of people who are leery. That was the word I used, a funny word, leery. Ours are leery. And you wrote back, I should even read the thing. Do you remember you wrote me back a letter, an email? And it wasn't about doing anything. It was just your reaction to that. Hang on a second. This is right in the moment, everybody. All right, we're going to leave it. But basically, because I can't find it, you said that having a positive outlook, just look at what's happened in the past. Many things have come up that have seemed leery. I don't remember which ones you were pointing to in the moment, but of course there are many things that people going, this is crazy, this is going to wipe us out, whatever it may be. And somehow we've worked through it and have had these things as positive allies. Now, there's dark and light to everything. So, there's nothing consistent going to go the way you might project it to go. So all I'm trying to say is that your positive nature, you have a very positive, maybe it's the outcome of all this research that you've been doing and this study that you've been doing about how the hell did we get here and who are we? Maybe it's part of that, because there's a lot of patience that has to take place, right? But whatever, it's easy. There's two ways to go. You can sit in the anxiety of what is going on, or you can take the kind of actions, both personal and collective, in terms of being with people and being able to, as Ram Dass said, just emanate love, period.
Mm-hmm. Remember what he was told by his guru, Ram Dass, come over here. I need to tell you something. You need to love not only everyone, but everything. And Ram Dass was saying, I can't do it. There's certain
Well, you need
things,
to tell the truth as well as all of that, and love everyone and everything, yeah.
But at the end of his life, with him in the wheelchair and body pain and suffering, he learned to love everything and everyone. I mean, he came to that. Yeah. And so
I'm a witness.
You're a witness. So here's another way to see it. And this is a vision that came to me up in Australia about 10 years ago at a beautiful festival. It was the middle of the night, and there were cicadas that had risen after 7 years, and they were just doing their cicada thing. And I was on a certain potent potion, and my time started to slow down, as these things do. Yeah. So time started to slow down, so that the cicada, the rhythm, sort of the symphony of the cicada, started to time shift and get slower and slower. And I started to hear all the different things. It wasn't just cicada sounds anymore. It was like a completely flowing, because the way they hear it, perhaps. They're faster brains, and they're hearing all these subtleties that we're not, because our brains just can't keep up. And at that time, I saw a vision, into the night, which was of two hands moving up. And the two hands that were moving up, one was kind of faded out. It was kind of not really very visible, but it was clearly there, because this hand, which was extremely bright and visible, couldn't move up like this without something to push against. So they were moving up. And then it occurred to me, this is the hand of all the sort of good, constructive stuff that we do to sustain life, raising children, doing our sanghas, taking care, being mindful. And it's kind of hidden a little bit. This is the one which is all the public stuff. The armies are coming across the hill. I'm going to die, before at XXX, or I'm not good enough. And it's pushing up too, but it can't rise even to its extent of its projection without something to hold against. So as we move up, as we get more in a sense in the extreme, we see this hand a little bit more. These ones become stronger, because there's always a countervailing force. Otherwise, nothing grows in intensity. So something has to push against. And then I asked the question of this vision, like, what happens up here? What happens across here when you get to the really high points? And the answer was very visual. It showed little glowing orbs, little things, little beings that were going between my fingertips. And I was holding my hands this way to sort of embody this. And they start to be one. They start to merge. So the extremes of duress start to travel over and be in communication with the extremes of equanimity and of, in a sense, perhaps healing or solutioning. They blend in that place. And out of that forging comes a new world, because it's all included at that point. So the extreme of pain or sorrow of loss, say for Krishnamurti, of losing his brother, becomes his release, his enlightenment. But it could only have come that way.
Yeah.
So instead of him taking his life and say, this hand dropping away and losing hope, he just kept in the inquiry, and then he walked out under the pepper tree, in Ojai, and he connected with nature, and he was absolutely released into a new reality. So perhaps that's the way we can see it, that these things support one another. But if we're only worried about this fickle finger of fate, kind of, and we're not seeing and putting energy in and living over here, we can lose hope and fall away, and then the system collapses and a human life actually can be lost.
You have this large advantage, Bruce, of the work you have been doing for decades at this point, and being closer to the reality of the big picture, shall we say, has got to have helped you with the individual picture and the balance and so on. So, yeah, very good, as they say in India. You know what? I know I didn't get to this last time, but tell me about Dr. Koshik. Is that his right pronunciation?
It's either Kaushik or Kaushik. I believe I got in touch with his son some years ago. I think it's Kaushik. Yeah.
And I don't know, Wiles of the Mind. I wrote that next to his name. That must be something I picked up from, is it a book, or who was he? How did you meet him? He's special in some way, I think.
He's special. He was a contemporary of J. Krishnamurti, Ram Dass, about in his 50s in the 1970s. And he was a doctor, more of the Ayurvedic Indian style. So he would see patients, and he had an opening in the mid-70s, a realization maybe from worrying about people or working on people's gut health.
Oh, really?
What they were taking in, if they're taking a lot of nuts and butter and, which is pretty common there, their whole system was becoming saturated and unclear. And he felt that the sources of disease were through diet, which is actually pretty close to being correct. And he started to talk about it. He had his own yogic practice that eventually was sort of termed a darshan type yoga. I came into contact with him because a friend that had actually sat with him until his death around 1982 or 83, at the time that Ram Dass said those words, had the sole collection of audio cassettes. So my friend had digitized them. I listened to them all through, and I thought, this is a really pure soul. This is an extraordinarily, who didn't develop much of a following. He didn't have much in the way of acolytes. He was just sort of in a transmission. And so I started to publish his work. And
really?
While I was in Pakistan, this is really appropriate. I was going to Pakistan quite a lot in the early 2000s.
Why?
Helping a software team get developed in the city of Islamabad. And then going and connecting with the culture there. It was a remarkable time because there was a lot of conflict, a lot of BA-52s and drone attacks and things like this in the skies, actually. And would go up to the Khyber area, the Peshawar area, and the border with Afghanistan. And so really touched the sort of burning coals of the geopolitical calamities of that period after 9/11. And on one of the trips, I actually took over the little dish on the roof of where I was staying, and I uploaded all of Kaushik's voice to the Internet Archive and put it into Creative Commons license. And I got permission from his son, who he said, look, our whole family comes from Pakistan, what's now Pakistan. We came from Karachi, which had been a major part of, British India. It was where the big port was, where the airport was, and then the country split in 1947 through partition.
Yeah.
And so I got his permission. I said, it's appropriate that I'm doing this from here from the banks of the Indus, and I uploaded everything the man spoke, and people started to take it and process it, put it into podcasts.
Really?
It was really remarkable. And I had some of my own clearing moments in Pakistan, simply sitting outside in my chappals, in my robes. I pretty much looked like the picture of the Pashtun, from that region. I could walk through the streets of Islamabad and people would give me AOAs. They would give me greetings because Pashtuns were really respected.
Yeah. Right.
But I was a fake one. But perhaps I wasn't so fake if I managed to smoke some hash, some really good Afghan hash at the time, which was very available. So this whole world was opening up for me, and this was 20, 25 years ago. But this one voice that had been lost and forgotten just on cassette tapes. And this is before we did the same thing with Terence McKenna. We restored Terence's voice from cassette tapes and launched that into the Internet Archive about 3 or 4 years later, because we realized he would be lost as well to the culture, except for his books, of course, because his entire archives have been destroyed in a fire. Twice.
Oh, really?
So there was sort of a connection there. In a sense, R.P. Kaushik was kind of my connection to the Eastern traditions in absentia, because I didn't know him alive. But he had a major impact to sort of bring me into that focus.
What's the darshan yoga? I mean, I'll tell you, this is what we do. We were doing darshan yoga, early 20s, sitting in front of, a complete non-dual entity, whatever it is. I don't still to this day. And yeah, it was just sitting in the light of that thing, sitting in the energy. We didn't know how to practice. I mean, yeah, we meditated a little, around that time. We learned Vipassana and all that. But really, we were just sitting. That's all we wanted to do, was just sit in that, with whatever that thing was. But what's Dr. Kaushik's idea of darshan yoga?
I think that it's just to go to a quiet place without a phone and listen to some of his voice, listen to some of his teachings, because I can't say that he was a non-dual teacher, because I really don't know that. But what's transmitting through his sharing is really fundamental and moves you. It just picks you up and moves you. And these are just through digitized cassette tapes. So I think it's one of the things that I had several openings, just being in the presence of his voice in absentia.
Really?
But one of the things he did point out later that always stayed with me, he said, when the teacher dies or the guru passes away, the followers come in and reinterpret everything. And the original teachings are lost. And this happens again and again. And in the lifetime of a teacher, if they realize that they need to start embellishing, there's a movement toward embellishing an original logos, and adding to it in order to create more appeal, they've also then left that.
Yeah.
And it starts to spin out. So it can happen in the lifetime of the teacher.
Yeah.
Common foibles. Yeah.
Yeah, common is right. In that respect, Ram Dass, this might be a little controversial, whatever, I'm going to say it. Ram Dass put out a book in the 70s, Miracle of Love, which was about Neem Karoli Baba, and he went around, and he and other people, and they recorded stories, mostly from Indian. Later on, we did a book that mother of my children, Parvati Markus, called Love Everyone, which was taken from the diaries of people who had been with Neem Karoli Baba Maharaji, and that day they wrote what he said. In Miracle of Love, unfortunately, Indian people do have a way of embellishing, shall we say. That's just a reality. It's not bad, it's not good, but it is real. And I see it a lot now on social media, people putting up stories and this, that, this is what he said. We do know how he spoke. It was, okay, he would never have said it that way or whatever. But the great thing about in the case of Ram Dass is that he actually had everything recorded. Not everything, but a large amount of it. So that's what we have a rudder with that. So, kind of happy about that.
And, in some future day, and I know we talked about this a little bit after our last conversation, which was someone could train an AI avatar on Ram Dass's immense body of voice work and written work. And with the right guardrails and ethics and the right checking, create a reasonable teacher out of all of that body of work that you could have an interaction with.
Yeah.
And in a sense, it would revivify. It's another way to bring that wisdom online. Now, of course, there are risks attendant to it, but the benefits could be tremendous. And there's actually work on an avatar of Terence McKenna. And Dennis and I got to experience this last year when they were doing tests of having Terence McKenna talking to Alan Watts in voice. And of course, the two never met.
Yeah.
And Dennis could literally do like a sanity check on Terence wouldn't quite have gone that far, but the cadence of his voice is absolutely spot on because there's enough voice data to train it.
Yeah.
And it was delightful. We were both enthralled by this.
Well, I did very recently. Some people put something together. It's a platform that we're thinking might be great, especially in relation to all of the courses, Ram Dass courses and retreats, not just Ram Dass, but our family of teachers. But they specifically honed in on Ram Dass, and it was, they even had somebody had done a drawing of Ram Dass, and they had the avatar was Ram Dass. And they said, okay, here, ask a question, and came back, and I do know this Ram Dass really well and the material over all these years. And it was amazing, Bruce. I mean, it was utterly amazing. I must say, though, that I was a little bit taken aback by the reality of how close they got to the voice, but didn't go all the way because they wanted to make it, you knew that it wasn't Ram Dass, but it was an avatar of Ram Dass. And I said, well, I wonder if there should be somebody else who's sort of, so we're in the midst of trying to figure out, how to do that. What are the guardrails, ethics, all of it.
And of course, which Ram Dass? Is it the Richard Alpert pre-Ram Dass? Is it the 60s to 70s? Is it the wiser 80s one? Is it?
We have the psychedelic Ram Dass. We have the college professor Ram Dass.
Yes.
Richard. Those two Richards that turned into a Ram Dass, and there's a lot of avatars.
Then there's the late mode stage Ram Dass of that sonorous, beautiful lower voice.
Yeah.
That East Forest, has worked so well with.
Yeah. Puts thoughts into my head. Yeah. Maybe we got to think about different avatars. That would be cool. Anyhow, this just goes back to what we've started this whole conversation about, related, and your beautiful analogy of the. I love this because it's also namaste. So right. The pushback, the negative, the positive, and so on, and how that creates the worlds. And we talk about karma, that creates the world that we live in. And that's something I think really, in and of itself, positive to remember on a day-to-day basis and necessary. to go through what we're going through right now. The synchronous fields, you talk about that. So I'll tell you a story. You'll tell me if that has anything to do with what you're talking about, okay? It's a Neem Karoli Baba miracle story. Maharaji went to get a shave. So he went to the barber, it's barbers like just outside on the streets that are shaving people. And so he went to someone, I guess that man was a devotee, and he shaved him, but he got halfway through it. And I think Maharaji must have asked about his family or something. He said, I have a son and he lives a distance away. I have not been able to see him in 15, 20 years or something, whatever, a long time. And nothing happened. But Maharaji said, hang on a second, I want to go pee. And he went away for a few minutes and he came back. Meanwhile, someone was with that son in that place and reported, it's so incredible. I had Maharaji's darshan today, October 13th, whenever, 1958, whatever it was. And he appeared, but the unusual thing about it was he was half shaven. So I don't know if this is the reality of what can happen in terms of being in two places at once. I mean, I think science is starting to prove that there is reality there in terms of, I don't know if they're talking about humans, but in terms of energy. And is that anything to do with this synchronous?
I think that this is the great question, the great mystery. Like, what are we inside? And is it a mind at large that Aldous Huxley talked about after his mescaline journey? That there is mind at large, which is a beautiful sort of English gentleman's way of describing this, or the Carl Jung synchronous field, or Akashic records, or K fields, all these things, or
mind at large.
Mind at large.
I love that. I don't remember. At large. Was that in his
that
first
was in
book?
Doors of Perception.
Doors of Perception, really.
And then he talked about the reducing valves of especially the adult mind that narrow our focus so that we can get lists of things done, and all of the stimulus of the world is reduced down and blocked out. And that he felt that when he was on the psychedelic, in this case mescaline, those reducing valves were just released. And suddenly the total beauty of the world was available as though he was a child again.
Yeah.
And so perhaps in these extraordinary states, these altered or elevated states, we are connecting in with something like a mind at large. And that one thing I'm pretty convinced of is, and this is from a very nerdy scientific basis, but it's actually common sense as well. If you focus attention, you create higher states of probability of things happening.
What do you mean?
Well, it wouldn't necessarily work with dice, that you're throwing dice and you want to throw a row of 11 sixes. And their focused attention might not be able to do all the physics needed to get that to happen. But in things that are to do with the living world, if we focus attention, say, on our dog that is actually at craving attention, its reality shifts, and then our reality shifts, and then its reality shifts, and suddenly we're in a relationship that we weren't before because we're paying attention. And this magical glue or goo comes and rises between the dog and us. And now there's relationship, and then the energy goes up. And in groups, and you might be doing this in Boone, but I've been in groups where people arrive from different places and they're They're all in different headspaces, right?
Yeah.
They travel and all this sort of stuff. And what you do is you have them sit and meditate just to calm down for a while, but you know that they're cycling. But then have them get up and start walking around kind of at random in a group of, say, 30 people. And occasionally they'll make eye contact with a person, but don't stay on it. Let it pass, walk to the next. And do this for about 15 minutes, and you create a group field. It's a reliable technique, and people then come into a state of relaxation in the group field. It's a physical thing you do, and you've got those little bits and pieces of moving the body's motion, eye contact, in and out. It just happens, and now you're in group field. When you're in group field, you have group field potential. And these kinds of non-local things can start happening. You can start reading someone's energy field from across the room. You can start understanding that when you're penetrating, say, a person who has an external energy, rather than a person who's deeply held within, you can understand their comfort zones. And this is all technology that's really gotten refined in the last 20 or 30 years through just experiment. And it was perhaps known to our ancestors for a very long time, creating group field through attention and through movement and body and action. And perhaps that's what was happening with Neem Karoli Baba, but that his group field was so enveloping and inclusive that all you had to do is be in it. You didn't have to converse. And in fact, conversing was kind of contraindicated. You just have to be present in it. And then I remember some stories about him where people would arrive and not connect at all. And of course, Ram Dass on his first connection, or his first entry into that field, wasn't really feeling the field at all. And he thought, oh, this is a cult. I need to move away. And then the eye contact happened. And then he was suddenly in that field, and fully in that and never left it.
Yeah.
So perhaps there's a clue there.
Yeah. Well, I know, when we're going to Boone, as we said, I know that actually the first thing that happens when people arrive there is yoga, getting their bodies to come down here, at least.
Okay.
And I'm sure there's some and there's also, hey, who are you? And, oh, wow, look, just people naturally encountering each other. And then it comes together. Next thing is food. Food's a great thing. Gets people together, feeling good, sharing. And then the next thing that happens, this is all on the first day, is Krishnadas doing, aside from the introductions to what we're going to talk about, which in this case, actually, you'd appreciate this, intimacy with all things is the name of this thing. This is Dogen.
Mm-hmm.
Enlightenment is intimacy with all things. So then Krishnadas does his thing, and that really gets everybody, all of us, out of our head and into our heart, into that place Ram Dass used to refer to as loving awareness. So that does all happen, and then it grows over the space of the days of the retreat. It's probably the most important thing that the Love Serve Remember Foundation really offers. I mean, yes, all the courses, and you can sign up for stuff online, and you can do these courses on your own time. You can do the retreats. You can do all of it. But getting together in person seems to be such a large part of the equation. Again, going back to what we first talked about and quoted Ram Dass, it's us just reflecting the place inside us that is compassion, that is love, that is kindness. That is those are the necessary ingredients, huh?
And I have a scientific explanation for how this works, but it's pretty geeky. How
good.
The field is made. And it's geeky, but it's actually common sense as well. So, for example, in every cell in your body, there are little molecules, sometimes they're pretty big molecules, called enzymes. and they're floating around in your cell. Sometimes they're attached to the cell membrane or other organelles, and they're there. They're tools, they're widgets, and they're being hit by water all the time. So they're being bumped around, they're changing shape. And then, instead of being hit by water, a special molecule like a saccharide, a sugar, hits a pocket of this enzyme, and another sugar hits another pocket. And that causes a conformation change, and the thing twists and snaps together those two sugars into a two-sugar thing called a polysaccharide. And then water hits a reset button and it unfolds. That's the whole story of life. That's the mechanism by which all life works, is this active, this complex little ribbony molecule that has this weird, folds into this weird shape that does a job. Now, if you take that apart, what that thing doing is called a catalyst, is doing something unusual in the universe. It's taking two little molecules that would never have gotten together on their own, and it's putting them together and it's releasing them for the next stage. But it's doing it millions of times faster than would ever happen in a random soup, just of these things in a soup. So it's an agent. It has agency. It has this one little piece of the job, but it also changes the future because this enzyme's around, or this catalyst is around, lots and lots of little disaccharides are floating around in the cell that can cause something else to happen, like building the cell structure itself or fueling the cell. And then there are other enzymes that can take those sugars apart and release the energy that's within them. And other ones that stitch large structures together or unfold genes, and unravel. And it's happening constantly. And it's all driven by energy, but it's also facing the terrible degrading processes of water that would otherwise turn everything to mush. So these molecules are working against that second law of thermodynamics that says, I'm going to reduce everything down to mush. It's death, in effect, that's constantly circling, always circling. And that life, through these molecular agencies, is overcoming that death temporarily, all the time, and shaping the future. Now, scale that up into a human being that decides they want to go to Boone, and they're going to drive. They're driving from New Jersey to Boone. It's quite a distance. But the chances are they will get there in one piece. And why? Because they are like an enzyme. They're like a catalyst that can do these magical things, run a steering wheel. The car was built by other magical things called, car factories or engineers or minds that designed the car. Highways were made. There's fuel along the way. There's snacks, all this sort of thing. And it happens highly reliably that people can drive to Boone or fly to Boone or even walk to Boone. And it's totally improbable in the universe, except that life has leaned into the future and said, I will manifest unlikely outcomes constantly at all scales, from the lowest little cell all the way up to human civilization. And manifest seeming miraculous outcomes are happening all the time. And the way you can look at this is that person driving to Boone is focused. They're focused on that highway. They got their Google Maps going, and they're paying attention. If they weren't paying attention, they'd simply drive off the road and they'd never get to Boone. They'd have to get a tow truck, and hopefully they wouldn't be injured. But they're using focused intention to get there. And this happens over and over. So what is happening is when they're focused and all the things are leaning into the future, it's pulling little marbles down valleys of improbability that become probable, and they become actionable items. And in intuitively based life, that's how you operate. You're in equanimity. You're reaching down into here. You're basing your decisions on watching and paying attention, sort of a very Zen observer way of doing things. And these little marbles of possibility are rolling toward you constantly. You're picking them up and you're moving in that direction with intuition. This is the way to go. And certainly, anyone's life has really been lived that way. If you live another life where you're in a state of anxiety all the time, you're blind to the marbles. So you can't navigate your way out. You're no longer a catalyst. You're reactive, as you said in the beginning. You become a reactive thing and you turn to mush. Same thing on a psychedelic trip. If you start screaming, as I did on my first mushroom trip, think Terence McKenna arranged, I saw the field shake. I had an observer to watch it. So the field was shaking. I said, wow, this is a bad trip. If I scream and ask for help and I just don't know what to do, but I can choose not to do that, fold back in and observe and see what the trip tells me to do. Keep breathing, it said. Number one, because then the body's not anxious. And so the trip started to guide me. I started listening, and then intuitive things started, and the marble started rolling. So in a sense, the whole of civilization, every single human out there is at a point where they can either scream and go toward the bad trip, and they cloud their future. They create this fragmented future, or they can come to equanimity and they can wait for those little guiding marbles to roll. And I think it's baked into biology. It's how life operates. And cells, don't do projection. A praying mantis doesn't project. A praying mantis is just a beautiful, precise, organismal intention being that is very good at its job. Cats are that way. Maybe dogs, some dogs project probably. The bigger the brain, the more the projection, the more the anxiety.
Yeah,
I know
there you go.
Cosmo, our very nervous, anxious young dog or little dog is kind of got a cloudy existence because he's so nervous. Well, he's a Chihuahua. So
right.
Anyway,
that's endemic to Chihuahuas.
It's endemic in Chihuahuas. So perhaps there's a clue there that if we want to create group field and get super clarity, we start from equanimity, we wait for the signs, we use our intuition, we go quiet, and we move. And it's a delicate game. It's not a loud, sort of noisy, grasping game. It's a quiet game. And then we're guided by this mind at large. We can listen to it.
One would have to say that in those cells, those marbles, I think the trick in a lifetime is to identify with the non-dual nature of those marbles, identify with the flow, identify with the synchronous nature of all things.
And to trust it.
And trust, yeah.
Trust it. So that the thing that shows up is going to kind of be like, what? I should be doing that?
Right.
And you do, because the little wiggle goes off saying, yeah, you should be doing that. Trust me,
Right. Did I ever tell you this? Trust. We talk about trust all the time, in these retreats or online, whatever we're doing, books. Trust is a very big thing. So is courage, as Maharaji said once. But one time I was hanging out with, we were on stage, actually, Ram Dass I and others, and we were talking about trust and intuition, two extremely important topics. And I said, when I met you, and talk about looking in each other's eyes, and the whole thing was just a pool of what the universe could do for me, nothing to do with Richard or Ram Dass, nothing. I said, that was my first real, I said to him, my first real trust experience. I mean, with me, a baby and being taken care of, mom and all that, yeah. But that went away real quick. But this was my first real experience. I said, what about you, Ram Dass? What was your first experience of trust? Mushrooms. I said, okay, that makes sense. Okay, we wouldn't all be here if it wasn't for that.
Yeah, because, in that story where he goes to the couch in the dark living room, you could sense he wasn't in a state of panic. He was actually in a state of slight annoyance that there was so much talking in the kitchen. And he really wanted to experience this. He knew that it was kind of blocking what was coming. And so there was innate trust. I'll just take myself into this other room and lie down on the couch. And then he had the question of, at least I have my body. so famous. And he looked down, so he was looking down. There was no body. There were no rolls. And he didn't go into a state of panic then either. He's like, oh, let's go with this.
Yeah.
Right?
That's all
where
curiosity.
Where are we going from here?
Curiosity and wonder. I mean, and courage, all of those things. I mean, those are the things that make up for us, I believe, to have a perspective that is positive, that understands it's a great thing to understand. We have done this before, and we will do it again, and we will come through it. There is a unity in all. There is, an interconnectedness. There is,
and the anxiety that's showing up is showing up our own shadow.
Yeah.
Not only the shadow of civilization where people are projecting these things or taking these actions, but the shadow in ourselves. Yeah. So if we can't hold to equanimity and we choose to go toward anxiety as a motivating factor, because let's face it, we get addicted to it. The sort of the drama of it. It drives cortisol production. For goodness sakes, it's a drug. It's an addictive drug. So if we admit to ourselves that this is a bit of an addiction problem in ourselves as well as the society at large, then we can say we need to go into some kind of rehab. And of course, Boone is a kind of a rehab, and Burning Man is a kind of a rehab. Yeah. But at least it gives us an idea of being free of that.
We're going to Burning Man. I'm not, but a few of us are. Our friend Gagen, he finally got it to happen.
Yes, he's the one. He's the one to pull that together.
Yeah, he totally is, and he pulled it, and it in Denver too. That was wonderful. The maps thing that he was major league involved in. Hey, one thing. We do need to get from you. Like, I'm particularly thinking about Dr. Koshik and getting a link there. But also maybe a link to Terence McKenna's work, because these are the two things that you did work on. I think those would be great to offer to people in the show notes, no?
Yeah, and in fact, one thing we can do in the show notes, we can put a link to his upcoming biography called Strange Attractor, which is written through an immense effort by Graham St. John in the UK with full support of the family. Terence McKenna's biography.
Wow.
And it's a long time in coming. It's beautifully done, and it's coming out on September 30th. And advanced copies are coming to us next month, because we were whole group of us were helping him with his research. It's a gorgeous piece.
Oh, we got to do something when that book comes out, in the fall sometime, Bruce.
Yeah, and you could talk directly to Graham, for example.
Okay.
So there's that, and what we'll do. So it's called Strange Attractor, and you can pre-order it now.
Mm-hmm. Okay, we got to put that in there. Yeah.
And it'll make a great audiobook, hopefully read by Terence's avatar or various avatars. Maybe my avatar will read the section about the work Terence and I did together. But Kaushik, we can actually, I will give you a link to the entire archive of the digitized tapes at the Internet Archive, and I'll send you, and for everyone, a link to some of the my Levity Zone podcast of years ago, where I produced what I thought were the most exquisite works, and you can just go there and listen.
Beautiful. Yeah. Beautiful. Thanks so much, Bruce, for coming back and doing part 2. It was great, very great. And remember, everybody, of course, you go to BeHereNowNetwork.com/mindrolling. You'll check out everything we were just speaking to in terms of being able to listen to some of this wonderful work. And, of course, you get to also experience everyone from Krishnamurti, who we were talking about, to Alan Watts, Ram Dass, Krishna Das, Jack Kornfield, and much more. So we'll see you next week on the Be Here Now Network. Thanks, Bruce. Thank you.
Wonderful. And one thing that maybe will be our part 3, maybe in person somewhere. are a long quest. As I remember your comments in late 2019, as Ram Dass was leaving, that he had asked for two things. One being move the Sangha to the mainland so that it's more accessible, and take up the question of science and spirituality, as he had done with Amit Goswami in 1980, and all those sorts of things. So that's a little reminder, Post-it note on a future project to do that, perhaps.
And we are working towards that, and we do need some support in doing it, because Bruce will be a big part of this, and we'll have amazing people in a retreat setting in person, and we don't want it to cost to be the barrier. We don't want it to be, okay, it's great for wealthy people and so on and so forth. So we're out there trying to fundraise around that, but it will happen. I am positive it's going to happen, and we'll fulfill that.
And someone out there will have a beautiful estate or home that they might be able to donate, and we can then curate a group and carry on what Ram Dass was doing whenever he met these great scientists.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Thank you for that. That's a good reminder. Everybody, will see you next week on Mindrolling. Bye-bye.